So how I like to start every amazing conversation. Usually the journey to get there is pretty interesting, right? On how people discover their passions and decide to form a company, right? And do something greater with it. So what was the journey like to create a modern botanical chocolate company?
No, I didn't really have an agenda when I started. It was just more of a curiosity journey. I really enjoy asking questions, and specifically internally. And so a lot of it started in 2009. I started waking up every day saying, I only do what I love. I knew that as a multi-talented, very interested human being, I knew whatever I'm going to put my energy into, I'm going to give it my 110%. I'm going to be creative. I'm going to have a good time. But I felt like there's something that I'm put on this planet to do. Mm-hmm. Like, what's my purpose? Purpose is a little bit of a aqueous term. Like when you say purpose, it's used so many times that it kind of loses its grit. So I looked at the etymology of that, and I was looking for my pure pose. Just put an E in the middle there. Your pure pose and your purpose, same root. And I thought, if I say I only do what I love, then the things that I really like or the things that I enjoy, maybe those things will peel away, and then what will be left will be what I'm here to do. It was an experiment. It was a risky experiment,
sure.
Grant.
Always.
I didn't know where this was going to go, but I was in a position where I thought, you know what? Life is short. I don't even have tomorrow guaranteed. I need to just surrender to what I'm here to do. So I woke up every day. I said, I only do what I love. At the time, I was working at a Chinese medicine school in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. I'm not attending the school because I wasn't really interested in having a piece of paper and becoming an acupuncturist necessarily. I was more interested in being in the community, which is a lot of how I learn best. It's just by being around people who are...
So you're there more to learn than to get a piece of paper. Yeah, it's interesting, thing. But it is a difference.
Well, I didn't have those boundaries between teacher and student,
mm-hmm.
that are kind of culturally embedded, especially in a traditional Chinese medicine school. Instead, I could just have lunch with the professors or the doctors and just say, hey, I'm working on this thing, and actually I said, mostly the biggest complaint that I heard, and a lot of times with different herbalists and naturopaths, is they'll prescribe herbs that have been used for thousands of years, different botanicals, teas, flowers, medicinal mushrooms, things that are potent and have histories of being potent.
Right.
But in our day-to-day lives, busy as they are, or active as they are, I like to say, people have the jar of herbs or the pills or the tea. They have it on their counter. They might have it once or twice, and they kind of just forget about it. Like, oh, I need to get back to it. So compliance was always an issue. I said to my peers in the Chinese medicine school, I said, hey, why don't you just put them in chocolate? If you want to get someone to eat something, put it in chocolate.
On a regular basis, yeah.
I knew at the time that chocolate was a vasodilator, meaning that chocolate opens your blood vessels. So It's actually designed to be a delivery system. Why don't you just put it in there? And they're like, oh, Justin, you can't just put candy in with herbs. You can't do that. And I'm like, I'm not talking about candy. I'm talking about real deal cacao.
Which is a fruit.
Yeah. Comes out of a pod, grows actually on the trunk of the tree, anywhere within a 20-degree band, within 20 degrees of the equator.
Mm-hmm.
So right around the middle, which, there's like funny jokes around, it's chocolate is right around the band, that's why you got a belly. But if you're eating really clean chocolate, and a lot of times the sweetener has to be clean, or maybe there's no sweetener,
mm-hmm.
chocolate is most definitely a health food. I mean, I personally eat about a half a pound of chocolate a day, between 200 and 250 grams of chocolate a day for the last 10, 11 years.
Unbelievable.
And look at my figure.
Yeah, hey,
look at my figure. So I got into it just kind of by trust and surrender.
That was around 2009, maybe, or before that.
Yeah, that was when the concept came to me. I started doing custom batches. So I'd say, hey Grant, tell me what you're doing with your life. You're like, oh, I'm building a cause artist empire where I'm attracting people. I'm having to speak clearly. I'm really digging in. Maybe you're preparing for a TED Talk, or maybe you're preparing for Ironman or some kind of triathlon.
Right.
I would design a chocolate bar for you using herbs, teas, and flowers, different botanicals and adaptogens that would help you do you the best that you could be.
Because that's the super interesting part, is that when we think of chocolate, we think of it as a candy. Right, we think of it as like a delicacy that we eat after dinner, right, or for a snack when you have the munchies or something like that, right? It's not looked at as a nutritional supplement. And that's why I find this so fascinating, is that you can use chocolate as a delivery system to deliver nutritional items that your body needs to excel at whatever you want to excel at, or whatever maybe illness you're dealing with or some type of symptom. There are products you can put in the chocolate, nutritious, natural, organic products in this chocolate that can help you in your life day to day, right?
Without sacrificing, your palate. You're still getting
and it's still delicious. We're eating some right now, and it's delicious, right? It's amazing. So
we're eating the brain power one.
We're eating the brain power one.
This is why we sound so on top of it.
Yes, and so that's the interesting part, is how do you, well, let's do this. When a person asks you what YES Cacao is or what Botanical chocolate is, right? How do you explain it to them, right? I didn't know what it was, right? But when I heard you explain it, immensely fascinating.
First of all, too, when you told me that chocolate was your first love, chocolate and basketball, I was like, "Oh, Grant, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna be friends." When people ask what botanical chocolate is, the easiest analogy is a pill pocket. It's like when you want to get someone to eat something, and it maybe the thing doesn't taste good, or it has a stigma associated to it, like a lot of health foods, herbs, and such do. Getting someone to eat spirulina for the first time, or ginseng, or something that is just foreign,
right?
That they don't know what they're gonna get in their palate. Is it gonna give them a bad taste? Whatever. I knew that was the obstacle to compliance. So botanical chocolate is essentially using chocolate as a delivery system or a pill pocket to get you to enjoy the 2 inches of your palate without sacrificing the 5 or 6 feet of the rest of your body.
Right.
It's interesting because chocolate has been done like that for longer than it's been done the way that we're familiar with it.
Interesting.
Chocolate as a sweet treat, as a candy, where it's pretty much drenched in toxic sugars, not clean sugars, but toxic sugars. Sure. That's really, in the last, this is the 500-year anniversary of a Westerner encountering cacao.
Interesting.
Cortez, when he was doing his crusade thing, his conqueror thing, not something that I necessarily think was positive thing, but there's silver linings. I don't think we would all be sitting here, and I don't think we'd be listening to this in the same way had it not happened. So that we got to make lemonade out of the lemons. But when he first encountered cacao, he thought it was a bitter almond. He was like, "Oh, there's something wrong with this almond." But eventually ended up bringing it back to Spain, and it was presented as a healthful alternative to alcohol when it got to Europe and specifically to the UK. You had the Quaker, the pious Quaker communities, people who were trying to get people who were trying to get their communities off of alcoholism and quote unquote impure activities or non-religious activities. And so chocolate as a drink originally, and as a drink, it was presented as an alternative to alcohol. It was just an energy stimulator.
Okay.
Kind of like a tea or a coffee.
Because they knew, did they figure out that it sort of releases these
endorphins, it made you feel good?
Right. And that's how to say, maybe we can supplement this instead of alcohol or other.
Well, I think
obviously you didn't know what they're thinking, but
it's a hard thing. But if I do some critical thinking here, and I think about the climate, the people, what they were allowed to say and do in a marketing perspective, I think we didn't have the laws today that would prevent someone from making a structure function claim about what something can do.
Yeah,
I think people were really taking their liberties. Now, I think that people were having a really profound impact. If you've had really clean chocolate, if you had really good chocolate, there's a feeling in your body that is palpable.
Yeah.
And especially since I am putting herbs and botanicals and different nutraceuticals and nootropics in the chocolate bars, you definitely, if you eat a bar, you're going to feel something, even if you're not that sensitive of a person. A lot of the people that initially were attracted to YES Cacao, a lot of the people were more in the healers, yogis, people in the health and healing space, who are more familiar with adaptogens and such, who kind of generally tended to be more sensitive in their feeling bodies. But I designed these so that an accountant on the 4th floor that was having a stressful afternoon and needed to wind down could eat the Bliss Out bar with Blue Lotus and GABA tea and kava, and turmeric and coriander, and you got this kind of soft, dark, round flavor that basically had this creamy dark kind of thing going on. And you finish the bar, and then the volume of your mind kind of quiets, and then your nervous system relaxes, and all of a sudden you're back in your breath.
Right.
And you can do that with a chocolate bar.
It's yeah. I mean, I am blown away just from, again, I know it's weird for me to say, but my first love was chocolate. You know, like I was always.
It's not weird at this table.
So that's why it's like us meeting is very appropriate, and the stars aligned. You know, I've always had a weird connection to it, right? And you never know what that is, whether you're introduced to something at a young age, right? And it just sticks with you, right? But it's always something. After I ate dinner, right, there was like, I just want chocolate. It doesn't have to be a lot of chocolate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just that, like you said, some people have coffee or a cigarette right after they eat, or like, you know, have sex or something like that. I was like, you know, I just really want some chocolate.
There's a ritual in that.
Yeah, no, and now it makes sense though, right? Now it was people like maybe made fun of me because it's like, oh, you're just addicted to chocolate. It's like, I was like, you know, it's not. It's just an appreciation. Like I like the sitting down and eating it, much like having a cup of coffee. The ritual of sitting down, enjoying it. That's how I like and enjoy chocolate. The point I think I want to get to is that I did it with chocolate that was, you know, out of a store, right? And not understanding or knowing what the difference is between maybe vegan, organic, botanical chocolate and, you know, a Mr. Good bar, right?
Cocoa versus cacao.
Exactly. So can you explain a little bit about the differences of, you know, a Hershey's bar you see at the store, Mr. Good bar, Kit Kat, right, to what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, there's a pretty big difference in that. And a lot of it comes down to commodities. You know, a lot of the larger chocolate players and a lot of the medium-sized chocolate players, most of the people who are in this space who are chocolatiers. So I'll do with some terminology here. A chocolatier is someone who takes pretty much ready-made chocolate beans that have been ground with sugar or something, you know, maybe sugar and milk, and they pour it into a mold. Maybe they flavor it in a different way or add some almonds, or so the chocolatier will take ready-made chocolate, customize it a little bit, and put it in a mold. A chocolate maker is starting more from the bean.
Gotcha.
On a bean to bar state, you're able to control a lot more of the flavors, the notes, the cleanliness of it. You don't need the stabilizers because it's just not being made on such mass scale. And you know, there's not equipment that you don't want to ruin, so you add, you know, different lubricants and stuff. So for me, the difference really comes down to a commodity versus a plant that's really respected or recognized for its ecosystem. With YES Cacao, we exclusively use wild harvested cacao from Ecuador, meaning there's no farms. We don't work with farmers. We don't work with plantations. There's not a piece of the rainforest or a piece of the jungle that's been clear cut so that only cacao can be planted in rows.
Interesting.
Which, you know, when you do it like that, that compromises the ecosystem, so that generally you have to spray things in order to keep pests away, as opposed to in the wild, there's an ecosystem where there's a natural balance of things.
Right.
The way I like to say is this cacao, which is, it's an offering from the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
At the peak of its evolution. Mm-hmm. This is the freshest, most up-to-date version of your chocolate software.
He's in the prime of his chocolate career at that point,
this bean is so ripe to be picked. You know, and a lot of times too with the more mass chocolates, the cocoa, it's a long time from when it's picked to the time it ends up going through the making process, then through the distributor, then into the stores, you know, and then into your shelf. And when you've had really fresh chocolate, or even, you know, if you've had cacao pretty much freshly made, you register that in your memory. There's something magical about that. So in general, I'd say cacao versus cocoa, you know, a lot of people define it different ways, but I think it's really a matter of whether it's ubiquitous, like you couldn't tell the difference between two regions or two different countries that are growing the same cocoa, versus cacao has all of the regional characteristics, the microbial characteristics. I mean, if you think about chocolate as a prebiotic also, because there are studies that have shown that chocolate is feeding your gut bacteria. You want the healthiest version of that chocolate that's the most robust and diverse, so that you're giving your body the benefits of as a digestive. So probably part of the reason why you like to have chocolate after you eat is that chocolate is a digestive. It's helping that process. Now you can also eat chocolate before you eat because it helps with your metabolism. Pretty much eat chocolate any time of the day. I find a reason.
But this type of chocolate, right? We're not talking about.
Yeah, you got to be discerning.
Yeah,
you know,
no.
we're talking about an industry that is very shady. And that has gotten away with things for a long time. And I think we were discussing the other day about how, and those who are fact checkers, I invite you to go on the internet and fact check me on this. The August edition of the 1906 Harper's Magazine was an expose on slavery in the chocolate trade, and a bunch of companies were called out and also pledged to do something about it. Including like Fry's and Cadbury's, I think Nestle's also. A lot of the big players have been in it for 150 years, and still a huge percentage. I think over 70% of the chocolate. Generally, anything that's going to be like you're getting a 2-ounce plus bar for under $2.
Right.
There's generally some slavery involved in that, and oftentimes child slavery. And I think people, I hate to ruin chocolate for people sometimes, but your purchasing of a lower quality chocolate is actually supporting child slavery. And feel that for a second. That's fucked up. I don't know if we need to put an E explicit on this podcast now, but I think it deserves that.
Yeah, but because and that's sort of with a lot of the stuff that, I discover and research through cause artists. A lot of the stuff I think we grew up on and we buy, we just aren't educated about where it comes from and sort of who makes it and the repercussions. But then also the power we have in our shopping decisions, right? I always talk about this stuff. We always preach is that if you educate yourself on what you buy, you can change a lot of the things you don't like about the world.
Indeed.
Right? And I think we're at this revolution of the internet being a way to research and discover sort of things, right? It's chocolate industry, fashion industry, diamond industry.
Shoe. Well, I guess that's fashion too.
Yeah, but apparel, let's just say apparel, right? A lot of these, when I see these big apparel people, like the dude on Shark Tank, the dude who did Fubu or whatever, he's like, and he always speaks, and I'm like, dude, it's like, hey, I mean, you built a company on just exploiting workers, like in the third world, and then you up the price to sell it to, impoverished neighborhoods at an extreme margin, right, to buy that product. And it's like, I don't know.
Where's the give back?
I don't know if what you did, it was actually valuable to society in a lot of ways. In a lot of these fashion companies, the margins are so high because they exploit labor in the third world. I mean, that's what they do. And the environmental process to make apparel is very destructive, right? I'm not sure the process of
same
cacao. Yeah. A lot of this stuff to make it cheap, to deliver it to us in America, to buy at a very, easy price point, there's some cost behind that. There are hidden costs in that wrapper. And it's tough. And it's tough to deal with and to know. But once you know, I think making an educated purchase decision on something as simple as chocolate, right? I mean, you could start there, right? I'm not saying go out tomorrow and start to educate yourself and buy everything in an ethical sense, right? That's impossible for somebody to do. But you can take one step. If it's chocolate, chocolate. If it's a shirt you buy, it's a shirt you buy. There's small steps you can take as a consumer to start impacting the economy in a better way. And chocolate has always been something that has been close to me, right? So when I find out these things, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know. I've ruined chocolate for a lot of people. I've bursted some bubbles. I know it's one of those things too. Even like we were talking the other day about fair trade chocolate, which I think is a great step.
Yeah, it's but what you said I think was really important. Of like, go. I want you to tell it. It's fair trade's one thing, but there's how you make it and things like that.
I really like to encourage people to continue asking questions. Sometimes we're looking for a little bit of a relief, and so you ask a surface question like, does it have this certification?
Right.
Fair trade, for example. Yep. But we don't go, we're neglecting, or I'm inviting you right now to look beyond into what does that mean to be fair trade, and what do we assume that it means, because we have a lot of assumptions with that. When I say fair trade, a lot of times people are assuming that the worker is taken care of holistically.
Right.
Like, oh, the worker is elevated to the status that we would feel good about.
Right.
that's a big assumption there. Technically within fair trade rules, and I think again it's a great step, because this is something that we need to constantly be leaning into improvements. I expect my fellow humans to evolve along with the businesses and the organizations,
policies and stuff we do. Yeah, for sure.
So I know with a fair trade situation, generally that's meaning a 15% higher than your national or your country's lowest payment.
Gotcha.
You're getting a big bonus. I mean, think about if you got a 15% pay
to minimum wage, to minimum essentially
from minimum wage, right?
Yeah, right.
In that country, but if you're making $100,000 and you get a 15% pay bump, then that's a significant
Sure.
It's a significant
to anybody. To anybody
is what I'm trying to say here. And what else is going on there? Because the vast majority of companies that are certified fair trade, which is it's a purchased certification, are not organic cultivation projects. So you have people you're paying a little bit more to walk around in fields and cultivate and pick the different fruits, vegetables, the different foods that are drenched in pesticides.
That's right.
So here, let me pay you a little bit more so you can walk in a field that has pesticides that we are finding left and right. That Bayer and Monsanto just got super lawsuited. And I think there's like 1,500 lawsuits in the pipeline for them. So we'll see what happens with that. But in the agrochemical business, they're depending on us not asking these questions.
Sure.
But when we ask these questions, we find out like, okay, here's the 35-year-old worker that's been working in this industry for 20 years. He has a family, or she has a family. Maybe there's 4 or 5 kids, 6 kids. But by the time you're 40, all of a sudden you've been living in these pesticides for 25 years. There are health implications to that. Not all bodies are able to take that.
Sure.
And it's not like fair trade means we're giving you health care.
Exactly.
We're not giving you these extra benefits. So for me, when I see fair trade, I like to see that, but I also want to see the organic label. Beyond that, I want to see the biodynamic label. I want to know that there's a regenerative situation going on where we're not just pulling from the earth extractively, we're giving it back.
To go back to, you said fair trade is, wages for the workers, and those workers are still working in maybe not so amazing conditions, but it's also, they're still making food that's going into our bodies that's not the best for our bodies too. The end consumer, which you're consuming into your body, is no different than that worker working in those fields. You're still delivering those pesticides at some levels into your body's ecosystem.
I mean, you eat every day.
Right.
This is a decision. I think that there are a few things that we do every day that make an impact. So it may be, it may be in an apple or something. It's just a little bit of something. Or I'm eating a salad and like, okay, it's not organic, but it's it's just a little bit of spray, or I washed it off as if that like magically cleans everything off.
Right.
If you do that every day, we're talking about tens of thousands of days in your lifetime. That's a lot of doses.
Yeah.
Think about if you're taking a dose of something. If you do 10,000 doses of something, you're gonna get some benefits or some
adverse effects.
Adverse effects in that. There are consequences to everything we do. Consequence is a beautiful word. It's just consequence. It's with pattern. So when we're aware of what we're doing, we can have an anticipated consequence. So I just prefer for that to be beneficial.
So your packaging has a bunch of different sort of labels on it, right?
True.
And there's I would ask is, how the heck do you make vegan chocolate, right? This sort of a misconception that dairy has to be involved in.
I'm kind of coming at it from the place of like, why do you make it not vegan? It's this extra step, and there, increasingly there are more vegan options, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a super dark chocolate. Like the chocolate that we're eating right now, for example, is my take on a white chocolate. It's more of a golden chocolate.
It's beige almost. The color, it's almost beige.
And in general, and it kind of changes in the light. So sometimes in the sunlight, it's kind of got this golden orange thing going on.
Right.
Sometimes under fluorescent lights, there's a little bit of a green tone, which some people are not so into. But green is generally a good color to be putting in your body as far as food goes. But as far as making it vegan, the reason why we put milk in is to kind of make it smooth, creamy. It's to kind of bring down the intensity, the sharpness of the cacao flavor on its own. Personally, my palate has evolved to enjoy 100% chocolate. Not everybody's like that, but I was in Trader Joe's the other day. They have 100% chocolate bar that's right by the register. And if I'm thinking if Trader Joe's is carrying a bar like that, that means people have an interest in their palates like that. What I did was I looked into the plant world. What kinds of soft herbs, think about velvety textures of fruits, or more, kind of custard apples that have been freeze dried or something like that. There are certain textures that you can think about in your mind, or that I think about in my mind. Well, how am I gonna make this a round and soft and enjoyable flavor? And so I was moving towards things like lucuma, which is grown specifically in Peru. It's egg fruit that has a great nutrition profile as far as vitamins and minerals. It's also not a commodified plant. It's still kind of not hugely known. So the soil that these trees are being grown in, are healthy still. Generally they're not trying to spray them. There's not really an incentive to spray because it doesn't go into the commodity train the same way.
When you talk about wild cacao, right, and how it's not in a setup where it's not farming or plantation typing, do you then just pay somebody to go out and just pick wild cacao? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, that's good just to bring it back to the fair trade conversation. In fair trade, we're talking about a 15% increase.
Yep.
As far as the wild cacao, I would say in average, it's about a 300%. So 3 times the wage you would normally pay a worker, because you're needing to equip them to go into the jungle, and they go in small teams. It's more work.
Sure.
So in order to get them, it's actually kind of like a natural system. I remember when I started first reading Cause Artists newsletters, which I highly recommend. When I started reading them, and I think about how a lot of businesses are started with a specific benefit or a specific cause in mind, or like we raise, we sell this and we give this, or we donate money to this.
Right.
When I started YES Cacao, I just didn't include anything into the value chain that didn't increase the value of the people's lives that are touching it. I want every single person that touches the products going into this to feel the yes of that, because that contributes to the vibration of the product. It contributes to the good vibes. If you put good vibes into something, you know this when you home cook. If you're in a great mood and you're making a dinner, that dinner tastes so much better. Yeah. Especially like if you're making it for your sweetie, you're like, here you go, babe, I was thinking about you, I was loving on you, thinking about all that good juicy yum yum, and now I put that into the dinner, and then there's that stuff translates.
It's an emotional transfer into the food almost.
Totally. And chocolate's very susceptible to that, specifically because it is such a cultural icon for love, for passion. It's embedded into the way we think about these things. So just to come back to that, I work with a team of 450 wild harvesters that was assembled and organized by a friend of mine that I met about a decade ago. And he had gone down to South America and Ecuador specifically because of his distaste of the way the chocolate industry and the value chains were going. Essentially it's like you have all these little families that have cacao trees. Right. So the alternative to a big plantation would be you have little families all over Ecuador that have a few cacao trees.
Gotcha.
And they cut their cacao pods down, they bring them to their local cacao buyer. Once that gentleman or woman has enough to bring to the next biggest town and sell their it's all these middlemen.
Sure.
You might go through 2 or 3 of those levels before a U.S. importer would be, there's enough to like fill up a container.
Gotcha.
And so where did all that cacao come from? Where's the transparency? What was sprayed? Whose dogs were taking shits on what? And there's birds and there's like rodents everywhere. I mean, we're talking about and things are the cacao beans are typically dried like on the street next to cars driving, and you have tires and you have maybe where the cacao is being grown is next to a river, and upriver there's an auto shop, and there's not rules about dumping oil into the river. And then you see kids that are walking through the town streets in the subsequent downriver that are having all kinds of debilitating illnesses or on crutches, or there's just certain common sense things where we don't necessarily see the consequences of our actions in these in these small villages. They're trying to fit into a Western commodified capitalist
economy. I mean, global economy. That's just it's so many moving parts, and we're just trying to get by, right? It's just today's a Tuesday. We're just trying to make it to Wednesday. This is what we have to do, right? So y'all essentially created your own supply chain.
Yeah, my supplier, Roberto, he was just like a very in touch with the energy of food, and he's very, very discerning about what goes into his own body, but then also what is coming out of his production facility. So
Gotcha.
The 450 wild harvesters go out to all these different areas that have been mapped, and we know generally when would be a good time and when is it worth it to go out and harvest the cacao beans.
Gotcha.
Just take what's right, because otherwise there's no sense in that. It's really just cut one at a time.
Crazy.
It's like that. Those cacao beans get cracked open, put into these fermentation sacks, so that when they're traveling back to the facility where the cacao is then further fermented, because cacao is a fermented food, and then it's sun-dried. This is all raw cacao, meaning that it's not roasted as a kill step. So the flavor profile, the enzymes, the microbes in the cacao are just a little bit less processed than a roasted cacao. Not all raw cacao is better for you. It really depends on where it's grown, minerals in the soil, what's going on with spray, all that stuff. And then from there, it gets shipped to the U.S. and he also ships to the EU, I think to Australia as well. And when I get the cacao, I'm getting it in a state where the nibs have been ground together. So I've gotten the beans and then stone ground those, but I think for the transport itself, for the preservation of the cacao, I've had just a much better experience getting the beans ground into like a paste or cacao liqueur, which we've just started selling on our website, which is cool to have people order that, because I know they're making their own chocolate.
Gotcha.
Or putting in smoothies, and it's just 100% cacao, not mixed with anything, no sugar, no nothing. And then when it gets to me, that's when I start to stone grind in the botanicals, which is this is a lot of the differentiator. Aside from being wild, the sugar that we're using is the sugar that I feel comfortable giving to diabetics and blood glucose sensitive people, because it's mineralized and it's sun dried, and that's a whole nother.
But what else would go into something that you would brew? I guess, right? Yeah, this is where the magic happens.
This is where a lot of the magic happens. So when I was doing custom batches, as I had mentioned before,
I wanted to talk about the story you had told me about the digestive sort of situation. This is a very cool story. So if there's another one you want to share, but I just thought that one was really interesting.
I will protect the identity of the person,
yes,
for his or her privacy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I'm probably going to use the pronoun she, because that's going to be easier to tell the story.
Yep.
I was approached by someone who had not been able to have an unassisted bowel movement for several years, about 6 years. And there was some stuff going on. She had gone to different doctors and healers, different diets, and all of the assistive drugs or exercises or whatever was going on, diets, they weren't actually giving sustainable results. When I talked with her, I was hearing something a little bit different, as far as this is deeper than just your guts.
Yep.
This is not just you need a laxative, which is kind of like a Band-Aid on a more systemic issue. And I just asked her, I was like, what's your relationship like with your parents? And when she told me that her parents were really strict, I was like, your parents are your bloodline. Your bloodline is constricted.
Yeah.
You have toxins in your bloodline, likely, in your bloodstream, that are preventing you from peristalsis, which is basically what gets you to have to go to the bathroom. Number 2, that is.
Sure.
So I made her a blood cleansing chocolate, and within about 4 days of taking the chocolate, and I'd reach out to her like my good bedside manner.
Yep.
I checked in, and already results were happening, and I made her like a 20 or 25 day supply of this chocolate, but within the first week.
And this is what, maybe taking a snack, one of these packets a day or something? Almost
it was like a bar a day. I think that was probably like an ounce a day.
Okay.
So not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But essentially I'm packing with herbs. Like the bars that we currently have available, I think are even a little bit toned down from the custom.
Sure.
Because you can really dial into what someone wants in a personalized.
Yeah.
But like this bar that we're eating here is 59% botanicals, 41% cacao butter. The Endurance blend is an 81% cacao, but it's essentially 40% of it is botanicals. I mean, that's a lot. That's a good dose. Like that's why you feel something.
Right.
So in making these blends, I learned a lot about what herbs go together, both for function, but also for flavor, because yippee-ki-yay if something can be healthy for you, but if it doesn't taste good, people aren't going to eat it.
Of course.
I mean,
It's like you can make an electric car, but if it looks stupid, mass amount of people are not going to buy it. That's why Tesla's successful. It looks good. I mean, sometimes you need things to look good, taste good. I mean, these things are, it's just how human beings work, you know? I mean,
that's like, you know, I'm just going to comment on your fashion at the moment.
Okay.
Grant, you know, you got a nice thing going on here. But I know that you're also socially conscious about your threads. So it's like,
I made this shirt. Literally.
You did?
Yeah.
That's fabulous. See, exactly. I didn't even know that. But see, there's something about that where like it feels good for a variety of reasons. It looks good. It, you know, it's something that you put your energy into. So in general, I think that, you know, with this delivery system and using chocolate as a delivery system for botanicals, adaptogens, I'm like mind blown that more people aren't doing this. So actually, when I started doing this, I set out to look for companies that were doing this, because maybe that meant that I didn't have to do it, because it's a big undertaking.
Hell yeah.
Business.
No, man. Especially something where you got to start from scratch on a lot of different levels. You know, there's no person you can look at to say, hey, this is how you at least build the foundation of a company like this. It's, you have to create the sector almost, which
is a category creation.
Yes, I mean, it's to think about that, and that you've gotten this far, and that can only be from passion and drive and belief in what you are doing to get you to this point. You know,
I gotta thank the chocolate for just being energy giving. If I was getting into the field of like sedatives or something, I think I would have a hard time driving forward for 10 years. You know, and I like to get high on my own supply.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of benefit in the chocolate, and there's a lot of testament to this has fueled me through challenging times. You know, anyone who has started a business knows that it's not a smooth sailing, even if it looks like it from the outside.
Right.
There's so many challenges. There's so many moments where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. This whole thing might fold, and then then a miracle happens, and then a connection. You meet someone offers out a hand. You have to kind of leap consistently. It's not just one leap to start. That's just the beginning.
Or even one email that says thank you, right? Like this shit that people don't. I think people, if anybody ever thinks about sending an email, you know, or commenting or sending a message to a company or a person that they want to thank and say they're appreciative for, please do that.
Yes.
That goes such a long way. I know I've had super down weeks and months where I'm just like, man, this is getting to me, man. It's hard. You know, I gotta keep trying to deliver this content, and it's like, it's exhausting and draining. But when I get an email from somebody, right, or that's ignition to help me.
There's a currency in that.
It's much more of a currency than you think. So I would just say that goes a long way. Please do that for companies you like and appreciate, or people. Please do that, because that really goes a long way in people being consistent and keep moving forward about what they're doing.
Don't hesitate.
Please don't.
When you have that impetus. I mean, I'm the kind of shopper in a grocery store where if I'm looking at a product that's new that I don't know, we live in an age, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm looking at a product I don't know something about, or I have a question about. Maybe it says natural flavors, but it looks like a really clean product, because you could put anything in natural flavors. And so you really have to trust who's making it.
Of course.
We don't really use natural flavors because I just get skeptical when I see that. I'm like, what are you hiding, kind of a thing. But I look on the back of the package, I look for a phone number or an email or social media, and a lot of times I'll just Instagram DM the person or the company and say, hey, I was wondering about this, and I take a picture right there, like, hey, this is me, a real person. I'm curious about your product. I would like to become a customer.
Right.
And then on the flip side of after I've eaten something or had a beverage and enjoyed it, so I love being that person that reaches out and says, thank you. Yeah.
You know? It's huge. I mean, it's especially in this day of age where we have so many 30 options to get coffee or an energy drink or a pair of shoes or a hat or chocolate, right?
Not botanical chocolate,
but
chocolate.
Look, soon you will have competitors. So
soon enough.
but yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that matters. Is, can I pick up the phone, right, for lack of a better term, or DM, and I get a true response, right, and I get that one-on-one interaction. That's something that just to me goes a long way, right? I mean, I try to email everybody back. I try to, do all that stuff. And I want to be overboard with questions, right? I'm sure you feel the same way.
I want people to ask me questions. When I was making the custom batches, and I made about, 40, 45 different batches of chocolate customized for people, addressing a whole host of different things, be it digestive or deeper comfort in being social. So that was kind of like dropping a little bit of like social anxieties, remembering dreams better.
Interesting.
Skin chocolate, weight loss chocolate, lower cholesterol chocolate. I was just up for it. To me it was school. To me it was like, I'm gonna make you a chocolate and I'm gonna learn something.
This is your PhD in
this is
chocolate craftsmanship.
This was my PhD in cacao blending and alchemy. It was kind of like an alchemy.
Okay.
So, because that you hit it. And, I would go deep in when I was doing those different formulations, because you really got to like channel and listen to what the person needs on a deeper level. And then also in knowing and studying the different adaptogens and botanicals and what they have to offer, both from a flavor perspective, but also from a function perspective. So, for example, the dirty chocolate or the endurance chocolate.
Okay.
It used to be called dirty, but we just changed it to endurance because apparently some people have a problem with the dirty. I don't understand. I like the dirty. And the reason we call it dirty is because it has a botanical in it called shilajit, which is actually a mineral exudate, meaning that it's an ooze that comes out of the rocks of the Himalayan mountains.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he said.
So we're talking about 50 million year old dirt.
Yeah.
That essentially, anything that was alive and died in the Himalayan mountain range and then returned to the earth.
Interesting.
And then all of the tectonic plates moving and different layers of soil, and I'm sure some earthquakes and ice ages, all these things are gestating and smushing and composting this material together to make this super, almost like a goo of sorts. And it's black and shiny, and it's like, I don't know how I know how the first people found it as far as legend goes. We saw that there were monkeys in the Himalayas that were gathering and having like alpha monkey feats of strength and getting down. It was like Burning Man for monkeys in the Himalayas. And as humans were like, what is this stuff that the monkeys were eating and spreading on their bodies? Now we know just through scientific studies that, and really looking into the substance, that is one of the most potent Ayurvedic medicines that is available. Shilajit, which is what it's called. It's called Shilajit, which is fun to say too. Not to be confused with Prince's drummer, but Shilajit, which is also rockin'. But okay, dad joke. I know. So we know it's got 85 minerals, fulvic and humic acid. Now your body's always craving minerals. So if you can get the minerals in your body, then you don't have that reaching, fill some empty hole in your diet.
Interesting.
If you have your minerals taken care of, there's not this craving of I need one more bite. It's like minerals are a language of nutrition that once they enter the body, they let your body know what it needs. It fills in the hole. It communicates. It tells the part of your brain that it's full before your belly actually expands to a place of discomfort. So that's the minerals. So it's got a bunch of minerals. And then the humic fulvic acid is phenomenal because it actually binds to toxins. Kind of like a clay, like a bentonite clay would. Clays bind to toxins, mostly in fat cells and in the lymph system, and pulls them out and flushes them out of your body. The Shilajit has a good way of cleansing the body.
Interesting.
And when those things are removed from the body, there's a lot of energy that gets freed up. And so that's why we call it the endurance bar, also the dirty bar, because it's basically old dirt.
Sure.
But that's just one ingredient that, because it tastes like ass generally, I needed to formulate the bar to be a desirable.
To get these minerals, nutrition in your body, you need to make it taste decent. So
I wanted people to not only to tolerate the flavor, but to really desire that flavor. So for that bar, in Ayurveda, some people consider Shilajit the king of Ayurveda. It's got the underground king in a way. And then the queen of Ayurveda is Tulsi or holy basil, which is like an analog of an anti-anxiety. It's very calming but energizing in that. So it's almost like internal energy and like feeling your feet on the ground. So you have both of those working. Then I brought in reishi mushroom, which is phenomenal for your immune system. It's probably one of the most studied mushrooms. And it's used in Chinese medicine more so. It's probably most is like Chinese and Taoist medicine. And when you imbibe reishi mushroom on a regular basis, it feeds and nourishes what's called your shen. We know qi. Qi is kind of more known as like qi is energy, but shen is like a type of energy that's more received from the heavenly bodies. It's like a different quality of energy than like a Bruce Lee qi kind of a a force field in that way. But in general, is that the right word? Historically and also pharmacologically, physiologically, let's just throw those together.
Say it 3 times fast real quick, though.
Yeah, historically, pharmacologically, and physiologically, times 3.
That was solid.
Your body, it was better than I thought it was going to do. Your body has like this force field of, you have the minerals going, you have this energy kind of coating you, and then also taking like Madagascar vanilla and putting a good amount of vanilla in, because vanilla is actually a chelator, and people don't know that. The medicinal qualities of vanilla, aside from it tasting and smelling so delicious, is that it pulls heavy metals from the body. Additionally, you got fennel and peppermint. Fennel is really good for digestion. So it's a lot of getting the endurance formula, and the endurance function is about removing the obstacles inside instead of like putting caffeine so that you can like have a boost. It's more like remove the obstacles that are taking the energy that your body naturally creates. And that's more how I like to roll with it.
I think that what I usually like to end on is when you have 10 years in anything, right? Whether you're a mechanic, whether you're an engineer, an architect, there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that. Also a lot of mistakes that come with that, right? Also some successes and lessons learned and knowledge base that you have built in your mind over those years. What are some of the takeaways from the last decade that maybe that surprised yourself, like internally, like, wow, I never imagined learning this stuff, right? And then what do you think that the next sort of decade, I know this is a big question, right? But the next decade, what would you like to see from YES Cacao as a company, right? And then also you yourself in building something that people can go to on a daily basis, right? To heal their body in some way from delicious, chocolate, right? That's the beautiful thing about it.
I like to make it as easy as possible for people to take care of themselves.
Right.
And that's what a lot of the last 10 years has been about, is a discovery process, more of an R&D phase of the business of really learning what people want. When I started this, people didn't know what Shilajit or lion's mane was. Turmeric was not a normal thing that people knew about. Let's see, about a year ago, I was sitting with my barber, and or it wasn't even my barber. I was traveling in Los Angeles, and we started talking, and he's like, well, what's good for you is turmeric. It's an anti-inflammatory. And I was like, man, if my barber is telling me this, that is something. It has come a long way.
Right,
so
right.
In the last decade, it's been a study of what is working in the botanical space, what works well with chocolate, really refining our sourcing and being able to scale, not just finding this one rare flower that we can get once.
Right.
That doesn't actually help people.
Right.
It's interesting, but interesting is not enough.
Right.
So I'm really liking seeing the trending of education in food as medicine.
Yes.
And that's where I'd like to see it go. And I see myself, and I see YES Cacao with like cause artists and team working with different, both my production guy, Coco Logos, and then I've got Boom Media in Austin. I've got One Drop, who's, it's like all of the different team members that are helping our design for our new rebrand, Rumble. These girls are just super on it, and they're very passionate. I find everyone that kind of jumps onto this train is passionate because it's chocolate. So I think that there's a growing team vibe that I think is going to continue to build over the next 10 years, so that we're really expanding this family of people who know how to take care of themselves with pleasure. Like, here's a permission slip for you to take care of yourself while enjoying yourself. And also just a shout out to my wife, who's also my co-founder in this. I like to mention her in this, even though she's of us, she's a little bit more on the shy side. I kind of like to be the talker.
Sure.
Her and I, we made one of our wedding vows was to be crazy about each other, but just to be crazy about life.
Yeah.
Not crazy, but crazy. And that thread goes through, and it's the same way of like reaching out to companies and calling them out and saying and praising people, because that network, that really is the bond of a community. Yes to that, and yes to you, Grant. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I like to say congrats on what you're about to do. Yeah. And I just feel super lucky to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I appreciate it, bro. I mean, it's been a beautiful time to meet each other, and